What would you do if you collapsed in the most exclusive dining room in the city, and the man who caught you before you hit the marble was the one man in the country nobody was permitted to say no to? This is not a story about a fainting spell. This is what happens when a woman who has been surviving alone falls, at the exact right moment, into the exact right arms. Penelope Kopekin had been running on approximately 4 hours of sleep and half a granola bar for the better part of 9 days by the time she arrived at the service entrance of the Waldorf Devonshire at 4:52 in the morning of the second Thursday in November, and she had, at that point, arrived at the specific state of physical management that a professional pastry chef with her particular history could sustain almost indefinitely, a state in which the body's ordinary signals of distress were converted, by long practice, into the specific vocabulary of tasks to be completed, ingredients to be organized, and hours to be endured until the shift's endpoint made the specific weight of surviving them retrospectively acceptable. She had been operating in this state for 6 weeks, since the specific escalation of her situation at home had crossed the specific threshold beyond which sleep in her own bed had become a resource she could no longer reliably access, and she had, over those 6 weeks, become extraordinarily competent at running her section of the Waldorf Devonshire's pastry kitchen on the specific reserves of a body that was, if she was honest with herself in the small private compartment of her mind where she permitted honesty, considerably closer to its operational limits than she had permitted herself to acknowledge. She was 31 years old, and she carried 270 pounds on a frame of 5 feet 5 inches, and she was, in the specific vocabulary of the professional kitchen, a large woman in an industry that had never quite decided whether her body constituted an aesthetic problem or a professional asset. She had been the executive pastry chef at the Waldorf Devonshire for 18 months, having been recruited from the Ritz-Carlton across the loop by the Devonshire's executive chef, a Belgian named Julian who had, upon tasting her hazelnut millefeuille at a private tasting event, told her within 30 seconds that he did not care what the rest of the city thought about her body because her body had produced the specific millefeuille he had just eaten, and that was, in his professional judgment, the only relevant fact about her. She had accepted the position within a week. She had, in the 18 months since, built the Devonshire's pastry program into one of the 3 most consistently reviewed pastry programs in Chicago, and had done so on the specific combination of technical precision, obsessive ingredient sourcing, and the particular quality of intuitive palate that her father had passed to her before he had died, in circumstances she was still, at 11 years and counting, in the process of processing. She had warm brown skin and dark hair that she wore braided close to her scalp and pinned beneath the specific black kitchen cap she had ordered from a supplier in Osaka after the standard cotton caps had refused to stay on her head through the long afternoons of production, and she had large dark eyes with the specific quality of attention that people who had been paying close attention to the world for a very long time developed. And she moved through her professional life in the specific tailored black kitchen whites she had commissioned from a tailor on Grand Avenue after her first month at the Devonshire, because the standard commercial whites did not accommodate her body in the specific way that permitted her to work efficiently over a 14-hour production shift. And because Julian had, when she had shown him the invoice for the first commission set, signed the reimbursement approval without hesitation and told her that the specific quality of professional tools required by the specific quality of professional work she was doing was not, in his view, negotiable. The Waldorf Devonshire, at 4:52 on a November morning, was operating at the specific quiet of a luxury hotel that had entered the middle of its night cycle and was awaiting the specific rhythms of the 6 o'clock arrivals. The pastry kitchen already lit at the specific service level of pre-dawn production, the main kitchen dark, the dining room dark except for the 2 low sconces near the entrance that maintained an ambient security minimum, the specific hush of the marble hallways, broken only by the low hum of the refrigeration systems and the distant murmur of the night manager's radio at the desk. Penelope crossed the service corridor with the specific tired efficiency of a woman who had crossed it in this exact condition 300 times, and she came into the pastry kitchen and turned on the specific overhead lights that illuminated only her production surfaces, and she assembled her mise en place for the morning's viennoiserie production with the specific automatic competence of a body that had done this exact sequence too many times to require conscious oversight. She was, at that specific moment, in the 9th day of a running fatigue that had, over the last 48 hours, moved from manageable into a specific new register that she had, in the small private compartment of her honest mind, begun to catalog with concern. The bruise across her left forearm, the specific yellow-green of a bruise in its 5th day, applied on the previous Friday evening by the specific man who had been living in her apartment for the better part of 3 years and had, over the last 6 months, been becoming a person she recognized less and less, was hidden beneath the fitted sleeve of her kitchen whites. The specific tenderness across her lower ribs, which she had cataloged the previous morning as either bruising or possibly something more structural, was hidden beneath the double layer of the whites and the specific compression tank she wore beneath them, which she had begun wearing 4 months ago at the exact point when the specific tank had become useful for reasons beyond ordinary professional support. She was, at 4:58 in the morning, in the specific condition of a woman who had been managing a considerable amount for a considerable time and who had begun, over the last several days, to encounter the specific edge of what her body was going to permit her to continue managing without expressing an opinion of its own. She got through the morning's viennoiserie production. She got through the 8 o'clock plating for the breakfast service. She got through the 10 o'clock production meeting with Julian, at which she delivered her specific report on the previous week's covers and the specific proposed changes to the afternoon tea menu with the specific composed professional register that had characterized every production meeting she had delivered in 18 months, and Julian, who was a Belgian in his early 60s with the specific quality of professional attention that had earned him 3 Michelin stars over the course of a 35-year career, watched her deliver the report with a quality of watching that she registered peripherally as different from his ordinary watching, but did not have the specific reserves to process at the specific moment of registering it. When the meeting concluded and the other section chefs filed out of the small office off the main kitchen, Julian said, in the specific quiet that he reserved for the specific personal conversations he considered part of his professional responsibility, "Penelope, a moment," and she stayed, and he closed the door, and he said, "You are not well. I am going to be direct with you because I have watched you for 18 months and I know when you are not well. What is happening?" And she said, in the specific composed register that had characterized her responses to all similar inquiries over the last 6 weeks, "I am tired, Julian. I have not been sleeping. It will pass." And Julian had looked at her for a long moment across the small production office in the specific overhead light of the fluorescent panel, and he had said, quietly, "The specific tiredness I am watching in you is not a tiredness that passes. I am asking you to go home at noon. I am asking you to permit Marcel to run the afternoon production. I am asking you this as your executive chef, but I am also asking you this as a man who has watched too many people in this industry over the course of 35 years arrive at the specific state you are arriving at, and I am not willing to preside over it in your case. Go home at noon. Sleep. If tomorrow you do not feel meaningfully better, we will have a longer conversation, and I will make specific offers to you that I would like you to be in a state to hear. Are we agreed?" And Penelope, who had understood in the specific moment of receiving the sentence that Julian had, in the specific way that Julian recognized specific things, recognized the specific shape of what was actually happening to her, had nodded once, and had said, "Yes, agreed, thank you," and had left the small office and returned to her section and continued the specific work of the morning with the specific quiet acknowledgement that she was going to permit herself, at noon, to leave. She did not make it to noon. At 11:47, she was crossing the specific transitional corridor between the pastry kitchen and the main dining room, carrying a tray of the specific canellas that she had been developing for the afternoon tea menu revision and that she was walking through to Julian for the specific final tasting. And the corridor was empty in the specific way it was empty at 11:47 when the dining room service was still 40 minutes from the 12:30 lunch opening, and the specific transition from the pastry kitchen's ambient temperature to the dining room's climate-controlled cooler air produced the specific cold shift on her skin that she registered as pleasant for approximately 2 seconds and then registered as considerably too cold. And the specific too cold moved through her chest and settled behind her eyes in the specific way she had experienced only twice before in her adult life, both times in the specific context of the last 6 weeks, and she understood in the specific moment of registering it that her body had, at 11:47 on the second Thursday of November, arrived at the specific limit it had been signaling was approaching, and she had approximately 15 seconds to decide what to do about it. She turned toward the specific alcove off the transitional corridor where she could set the tray down and steady herself against the wall, and she made it approximately 3 steps in that direction before the specific too cold behind her eyes became the specific gray tunneling of vision that she had also experienced twice before. And her hearing did the specific muffling thing that happened when the blood was leaving her head faster than her body was making arrangements to replace it. And she thought, in the specific clarity of the moment just before the tunnel closed completely, that she was going to have to set the tray down at whatever the nearest surface was, which was not the alcove because the alcove was too far, but was in fact the specific low console table in the dining room proper. 3 steps ahead of her, that supported the specific white orchid arrangement that decorated the dining room's entrance, and she took the specific 3 additional steps toward the console table with the last operational resources her body was going to make available to her. And she got the tray of Canellis down onto the console table beside the orchid with a specific precision that she was, in retrospect, going to be professionally satisfied with. And then the tunnel closed, and her legs stopped being available to her. And Penelope Kopikin, at 11:48 and 11 seconds on the second Thursday of November, fainted directly onto the polished marble floor of the Waldorf Devonshire's terrace room in front of the specific single-occupied table that had been arranged, at the specific request of the specific person seated at it, for a private 11:30 business meeting that was, as of that specific moment, 1 hour into its scheduled 90 minutes. The specific person at the specific table caught her before she hit the marble. He did this in a specific sequence of motions that Penelope, who was not present for the sequence, would later reconstruct from the specific accounts of the 2 witnesses who had been present, the maitre d' at his station near the entrance, and the specific man at the specific table's second chair, who was a senior lieutenant of the specific man who caught her, and the sequence, according to both accounts, had taken approximately 1.4 seconds and had involved the specific man at the specific table rising from his chair with a quality of motion that both witnesses would independently describe as impossibly fast for a man of his size, crossing the 12-foot distance between his table and the console table in 3 long strides, and catching her at approximately the specific midpoint of her collapse, one arm around her back and the other beneath her knees, with the specific precision of a man who had performed the specific calculation of her body's mass and trajectory in the fraction of a second the specific calculation had required, and had adjusted the specific angle of his intercept to accommodate the specific weight he had assessed. He had lowered her, with the specific care of a man who was not going to permit her spine to hit the marble at any moment of the transition, to the floor. He had, in the specific same motion, angled her slightly toward her left side and elevated her legs on the specific low velvet bench that had been positioned near the console table for exactly the aesthetic purpose of being positioned near it. He had checked her pulse at the specific point of her neck with 2 fingers of his right hand. He had turned his head toward his lieutenant at the specific table and said, in a voice that both witnesses would independently describe as impossibly quiet for the specific gravity of the situation, "Get Julian. And get Dr. Vasquez here in 20 minutes. Now." Penelope Kopikin opened her eyes approximately 90 seconds later. She opened them into the specific unusual proximity of a face she had never seen at close range before, but recognized instantly, at close range, with the specific certainty of a woman who had, like every other resident of Chicago, who paid even glancing attention to the shape of the city she lived in, absorbed his general image from the specific quiet architecture of the city's high-end professional press over a period of years. Gabriel Aventino, 44 years old, third-generation head of the Aventino organization, which controlled a considerable proportion of the private port operations along the southern lakefront, and, in the specific vocabulary of things that everyone in Chicago's professional class knew and no one wrote down, controlled considerably more than that. He was, at close range on the terrace room's polished marble floor at 11:49 on a Thursday in November, crouched beside her with one hand still resting at the specific point of her wrist where he had continued to monitor her pulse through the 90 seconds of her unconsciousness, and his face, very close to hers, angled slightly downward. The specific quality of severity that characterized every publicly available image of him rearranged at close range into a specific quality of attention she had no vocabulary for, was doing the specific thing his face was doing, which was watching her with a completeness of focus that she registered before she had fully oriented to consciousness and could not stop registering once she had. "Don't move," he said. His voice was a low, gravel and smoke baritone that she felt in her sternum before she processed it as sound, and she understood at close range that the voice was pitched at the specific volume he had determined was appropriate for the specific distance between them and would not be pitched at any other volume regardless of what the surrounding circumstances required. "You have fainted. I want you to lie exactly where you are for the next 3 minutes, and I want you to answer specific questions I am going to ask you about your condition. Can you do that?" "Yes," Penelope said. Her voice came out considerably thinner than she had intended, in the specific register of a voice that had been operating on the specific 9th day of running fatigue and had, in the specific 90 seconds of unconsciousness, discovered that the specific fatigue was considerably worse than the specific voice had been cataloged. "Ing. Yes, I can do that." "When did you last eat?" he said. "I had a half of a granola bar at 4 this morning." Before that, she had to think. She had, at some point in the previous 6 weeks, stopped catalog, her food intake with any specificity, in the specific way that people who were surviving on the specific resources of adrenaline and professional discipline stopped catalog, their intake, because the specific catalog, became one of the small daily discouragements they did not have the specific reserves to sustain. "Last night, family meal at 6. Half a portion. I was running the pass at 7:30, and I did not have time to eat the full portion." "When did you last sleep for a period of more than 3 consecutive hours?" She had to think about that too. 9 days ago. I think. I have not been sleeping at home. I have been sleeping on the specific pull-out couch in the small office off the pastry kitchen, in periods of approximately 2 hours at a time, between the end of afternoon production and the specific beginning of evening prep. Gabriel Aventino was quiet for a moment. His hand at her wrist had not moved. His face, at close range in the specific overhead light of the terrace room's ceiling, did not change in any register she could have named from the specific images she had cataloged, from press coverage over the years. But something in his amber eyes, a very specific and very still and very complete something, moved through and settled, and the specific version of him that emerged from the specific microorganization was, she registered with the specific animal precision of a woman who had, in the last 6 weeks, become extraordinarily sensitive to the small internal reorganizations of dangerous men in her immediate proximity, considerably more dangerous than the version of him that had preceded it, in a direction that she understood in the specific moment of registering was oriented away from her rather than toward her. "Why are you not sleeping at home?" he said. The specific pitch of the sentence was the same specific pitch he had used for every prior sentence, but the specific weight of it was different, and Penelope, who had been cataloged, the specific weights of specific sentences from specific dangerous men for the better part of 3 years, understood the specific difference precisely. She looked at him. She had, in the 6 weeks since the specific escalation at home had crossed the specific threshold, not spoken the specific true answer to that specific question to any human being, including Julian, who had recognized the specific shape of what was happening to her 90 minutes earlier in the small production office and had not, in the specific gentleness of his approach, required her to name it. She had held the specific true answer at the specific internal location she held it, and she had managed the specific consequences of holding it, and she had not, until this specific moment on the polished marble floor of the terrace room at 11:52 in the morning of the second Thursday of November, been asked the specific question with the specific pitch that made the specific true answer available to her voice. Because the specific person who is currently living at my address is a specific person who has, over the last 6 months, developed the specific practice of expressing his frustrations at the end of his workday through the specific application of force to my person, and I have found, over the last 6 weeks, that the specific arrangement of not being at the specific address at the specific hour of his return has become more reliable protection than any of the specific alternatives I have previously attempted, Penelope said. She said the specific sentence in the specific, composed professional register that had characterized her responses to Julian in the small production office 90 minutes earlier. In the specific, composed professional register that had characterized her responses to every workplace inquiry over the previous 6 weeks. Because the specific register was the specific register available to her voice, and she was not going to be able, in the specific state she was currently occupying, to modify it into something more appropriate to the specific content of what she was saying. She said the specific sentence lying on the specific marble floor with the specific weight of Gabriel Aventino's hand at her wrist and the specific weight of Gabriel Aventino's amber eyes on her face. And she said it in the specific full completeness that 6 weeks of holding it had built up behind it. And when the sentence ended, she was quiet. And the specific quiet had the specific quality of a specific sentence that had been said aloud for the first time and could not be unsaid. Gabriel Aventino was quiet for a very long moment. The specific stillness of him did not visibly change. But the specific ambient temperature of the terrace room, in the specific perception of the specific witness at the maitre d's station some 30 feet away, who would, in his private accounting of the specific incident afterward, describe it in exactly these terms to his wife, dropped, in the specific 90 seconds that followed Penelope's completed sentence, by what felt like 10 degrees, and stayed there. Your name, Gabriel said, in the specific pitch he had been using. Penelope Kopican. Kopican, he repeated, in the specific tone of a man who had just been given a specific piece of information that had, in the specific instant of receiving it, connected to a specific prior piece of information that had been sitting quietly in his memory for a period of years, and who was, in the specific instant of the connection, in the process of reassessing the specific full weight of what he was now looking at. Your father was Solomon Kopican. Penelope, who had not heard her father's name said aloud by another human being in approximately 6 years, and who had certainly not heard it said aloud in the specific pitch that Gabriel Aventino had just deployed for it, felt something specific move through her chest that was not a physical sensation attributable to the specific fainting, and looked at him with a specific alertness that she had not, 90 seconds earlier, had the resources to deploy. Yes, she said. How do you know that name? Your father worked with my father for the better part of 18 years, in a professional capacity that considerably exceeded the specific vocabulary the general public would have applied to it, Gabriel Aventino said, still at the specific pitch, still with his hand at her wrist, still with his amber eyes on her face, at close range. Your father was one of the specific handful of men my father regarded as a personal peer over the course of his adult professional life. Your father died when you were 20, in circumstances that were represented to your mother as a heart attack and that were, in fact, the specific result of a targeted action by an organization that has since ceased to exist, in the specific matter of my father's response to the specific event, over a period of approximately 3 months following the specific action. I have known your name for 11 years. I have known the specific address of the pastry kitchen you worked at prior to this one, and I have known the specific address of the pastry kitchen you work at now, and I have known the specific address at which you have been living for the past 3 years, and I have, over the 11 years, arranged for specific small quiet supports to be made available to you in the specific pattern my father established for the specific families of specific men he had considered peers. I have not previously introduced myself to you because the specific supports were arranged with the specific understanding that you were, from my organization's perspective, entitled to your specific privacy, and because the specific matter of your father's death is not a matter I have been in a position to speak to you about until this specific moment on this specific marble floor. I am now, however, going to have to speak to you about it, because you have just told me the specific sentence you just told me, and the specific man in your apartment is, as of the specific moment you completed the sentence, in a category of person that is, in the specific vocabulary of the organization I run, no longer entitled to continue existing. I would like you to know that specifically, so that you understand the specific shape of what is now going to happen. His name. Penelope looked at Gabriel Aventino at close range on the terrace room's polished marble floor. She looked at the amber eyes and the sharp jaw and the specific quality of complete non-performative attention that was directed at her face and was not going to move from her face until the specific conversation they were having concluded. She thought about her father, who had died on the specific summer afternoon when she had been 20, in the specific circumstances that had been represented to her mother by the specific hospital as a cardiac event, and who had been buried with the specific quiet dignity of a man whose specific full life had not, in the specific published obituary, been described with anything approaching the specific real completeness of it. She thought about her mother, who had, in the 11 years since, lived in the specific two-bedroom on the north side of the city that Penelope had always assumed was the specific product of her father's pension and now understood, in the specific instant of Gabriel Aventino's disclosure, was probably the specific product of something considerably more organized. She thought about the specific man who had been living in her apartment for 3 years, who had been a graduate student in economics when they had met and had, over the last 18 months, moved from graduate student in economics through several successive versions of himself into the specific current version of himself who had, on the previous Friday evening, put the specific mark on her forearm and, on the specific morning before that, put the specific tenderness across her lower ribs, and who was, at 11:55 in the morning of the second Thursday of November, in the specific apartment she had left at 4 in the morning and was probably sleeping off the specific quantity of whiskey he had consumed the previous evening. His name is Adrian Thorne, Penelope said. He is 32 years old. He was a graduate student when we met 3 years ago. He has not been a graduate student for 18 months. He is currently at my apartment on West Superior, number 417, 4th floor. He is probably asleep at this specific hour. He will be awake by 3 inch. Thank you, Gabriel Aventino said. He said the 2 words with the specific weight of a man who had just received a specific administrative confirmation he required in order to execute a specific decision he had already made, and he did not say anything additional about the specific decision, because the specific decision was, in the specific vocabulary of his profession, not one that required further discussion at the specific moment of its execution. He turned his head slightly toward the specific man who had, over the course of the previous 4 minutes, materialized at his right shoulder without Penelope having registered his approach, and he said something in a specific low pitch that she did not fully catch, but that involved the specific words West Superior and 417 and the specific phrase before 3, and the man at his shoulder, who was, she registered peripherally, a man of specific compact competence, dressed in a specific charcoal suit, nodded once and departed the terrace room at a specific unhurried pace that was somehow considerably more efficient than a hurry would have been. Gabriel Aventino returned his amber eyes to Penelope's face. He did not release her wrist. You are going to be examined by a specific physician who will be here in approximately 8 minutes. You are then going to be moved, when the specific physician clears you to be moved, to the specific residence of mine in the Gold Coast where you are going to spend the next several days recovering under specific supervised care. You are not returning to the specific apartment on West Superior. Your mother, who currently lives at 1842 North Sheridan in apartment 3C, will be moved this afternoon by my staff to a specific guest cottage on the specific residence's grounds where she will be able to be with you during the specific period of your recovery. You will not need to return to the Waldorf, Devonshire for the remainder of this week, at which point you and I will have a specific longer conversation about the shape of the remainder of your professional life. Your executive chef, Julian, has been notified of the specific situation to the specific extent it is appropriate for him to be notified, and he will make the specific accommodations required. Do you have any specific questions about what I have just said? Penelope Kopikin lay on the specific polished marble of the terrace room floor at 12 o'clock exactly on the second Thursday of November, at close range to the amber-eyed face of Gabriel Aventino, and she performed the specific small internal calculation that she had, over the last 6 weeks, become extraordinarily practiced at performing in real time under specific pressure, and she arrived at the specific conclusion that she was not going to argue with any of the specific propositions Gabriel Aventino had just made, because each of the specific propositions was, in the specific full accounting of her current situation, considerably more advantageous than any of the specific alternatives she had been managing on her own for 6 weeks. And because the specific man delivering the specific propositions had, in the specific 90 seconds of catching her before she hit the marble and the specific subsequent conversation, established with a specific completeness that she was not going to be able to argue with even if she had wanted to, that she was, from his specific perspective, no longer a person who was going to be permitted to manage her situation alone. "I have one question," she said. "Adrian, what is going to happen to Adrian?" Gabriel Aventino looked at her. The specific expression on his face at close range on the specific marble did not change in any register she could have named. "Adrian Thorne is going to cease to be a specific problem in your life within approximately 3 hours. The specific mechanism by which that outcome will be produced is not something you need to be involved in or informed about, and it is not something the specific state of Illinois will subsequently have questions about, because the specific administrative structure of the outcome will not require any state-level attention. I am telling you the specific outcome because you asked, and because I do not intend, at any point in whatever specific relationship you and I are about to begin having, to lie to you about the specific operational consequences of the specific decisions I make on your behalf. That is the specific foundation I know how to build anything on. If the specific foundation is not one you can accept, tell me now, and I will still ensure Adrian Thorne is no longer a specific problem in your life, and I will still ensure your specific support and your mother's, and I will withdraw the specific personal element of the offer, and you will never see me again, and I will consider that a specific fair and honest outcome. What I am asking, at this specific moment on this specific marble floor, is whether the specific personal element of the offer is one you would like to consider accepting." Penelope Kopikin looked at Gabriel Aventino. She looked at the specific face and the specific amber eyes and the specific quality of complete attention that had not moved from her face at any point in the previous 8 minutes, and she thought about her father, whom she had loved and who had, apparently, been considerably more than the specific accountant her mother had described him as, and she thought about the specific 11 years of small quiet supports that had, apparently, been arranged for her by the specific man crouched beside her and by the specific man who had been his father before him, and she thought about the specific 6 weeks of managing what she had been managing, and the specific 9th day of the specific running fatigue, and the specific fainting into the specific arms of the specific one person in the city whose specific arms she had, apparently, been engineered by the specific arrangements of a decade to fall into, and she made the specific decision that had, in the specific full accounting of the previous 9 minutes, made itself. "The specific personal element of the offer is one I would like to consider accepting," she said. "I would like to consider it very carefully. I would like to consider it with the specific full attention it deserves, which I do not have available to me at this specific moment on this specific marble floor, because I am, at this specific moment, considerably closer to the specific edge of my operational capacity than I have permitted myself to be for 6 weeks. But I would like you to know that the specific answer to your specific question is yes, and that the specific carefulness I am going to bring to the specific consideration is not a hedge, but a specific expression of the specific seriousness with which I intend to accept." Something moved across Gabriel Aventino's face at close range in the specific overhead light of the terrace room that was, unmistakably and completely, the specific first version of a specific smile Penelope would come to know very well over the specific weeks and months and years that followed, and it was a smile that did not appear on any of the specific published images of him she had catalogued over the years, and it was, in the specific first instance of encountering it, one of the specific most private things she had ever been shown by another person. "That is a considerably wiser response than the specific response I would have made in your position, Mia Cara," he said, and the specific endearment landed in the specific first instance of him deploying it with the specific quality of a word he had been holding in the specific reserve of his internal vocabulary for the specific occasion of being permitted to use it aloud. And Penelope registered it in the specific first instance, and did not respond to it verbally, and understood that she was not, going forward, going to permit anyone else to use the specific version of it on her, because the specific version of it belonged, from the specific moment of his first deployment, to him. "Dr. Vasquez will be here in 3 minutes. We will move you when she clears you to be moved." Everything else is going to be arranged around the specific pace at which you are able to move through the next several hours. I am going to stay directly beside you until the specific physician arrives, and I am going to stay directly beside you through the specific examination, and I am going to stay directly beside you through the specific transport to my residence, and I am going to stay directly beside you through the specific arrival of your mother at the specific cottage on my residence's grounds, because that is the specific arrangement I am going to make available to you at this specific moment, and because the specific alternative, which is that at any point during the specific transitions of the next several hours you would be alone, is not a specific alternative I am willing to permit. Is that acceptable? Yes, Penelope said. That is acceptable. Dr. Vasquez arrived in 3 minutes. She was a specific compact woman of approximately 50 years, in specific well-cut dark clothes, carrying a specific medical bag that had the specific quality of a bag that had been packed by a woman who had responded to specific calls of this specific general nature at specific irregular hours over the specific course of a specific long professional relationship with the specific organization that had summoned her, and she examined Penelope with a specific clinical thoroughness that occupied the next 14 minutes, and she concluded her examination with the specific assessment that Penelope was suffering from severe sleep deprivation, moderate malnutrition, a specific hairline fracture of the 8th rib on the left side that would heal on its own with specific rest and specific pain management, a specific soft tissue bruise of the left forearm consistent with a specific grip trauma applied approximately 5 days prior, and a specific general condition of physical and psychological exhaustion that required, in her specific professional judgment, a minimum of 72 hours of complete, supervised rest before any subsequent professional or personal obligations could be responsibly resumed. She said all of this to Penelope directly, in the specific matter-of-fact register that was the specific correct register for saying it, and then she said it again to Gabriel Aventino, in the same specific register, with the specific additional operational detail that Gabriel Aventino would require in order to construct the specific supervised rest environment she had specified. Gabriel Aventino listened to the second delivery of the assessment with the specific quality of a man receiving a briefing he intended to execute at the specific standard the briefing described. And when Dr. Vasquez concluded, he asked 3 specific short questions about pain management and about the specific timing of a specific follow-up examination, and about the specific dietary considerations of the specific first 72 hours, and Dr. Vasquez answered each of the 3 specific questions with the specific efficiency of a professional woman who had been asked these specific questions by Gabriel Aventino on prior occasions, and had learned the specific level of detail he required. Penelope was moved from the specific marble floor of the terrace room to Gabriel Aventino's residence on Astor Street at 12:47 in the afternoon of the second Thursday of November, in the specific back of the specific armored Mercedes Maybach that had been positioned at the Waldorf Devonshire side entrance for the specific purpose of the specific transport, and she was moved from the specific vehicle into the specific ground floor bedroom that had been prepared for her, in the specific interval of the specific transport, by the specific staff who had received the specific instruction from Gabriel Aventino's second lieutenant at approximately 12:15. The specific ground floor bedroom had been chosen because Dr. Vasquez had specified that Penelope should not, in the specific first 72 hours, be required to negotiate stairs, and it had been prepared with the specific attention to detail that Penelope was, over the specific following 72 hours, going to have considerable time to catalog with the specific professional appreciation of a woman who had spent 18 months managing the specific back-of-house operations of a luxury hotel and had accumulated specific opinions about what the specific difference was between hospitality that had been arranged competently and hospitality that had been arranged by a specific person paying specific personal attention. The room was full of specific late-morning light through the specific east-facing tall windows. The specific bed had been made with the specific weight of linens Dr. Vasquez had specified. The specific side table had been arranged with the specific small collection of items, a specific carafe of water, a specific small plate of specific sliced pears, a specific small stack of paperback books in the specific general category of books Penelope would come to understand had been selected on the basis of the specific research that Gabriel Aventino's personal assistant had. In the specific interval since the specific 90-second unconsciousness on the marble floor conducted into Penelope's specific reading history through the specific public library records that Gabriel Aventino's specific technical resources permitted him to access. The specific pajamas at the foot of the specific bed were the specific pajamas of the specific fabric weight that Dr. Vasquez had specified for the specific recovery period, in the specific size that Gabriel Aventino had estimated during the specific 8 minutes he had spent at close range with Penelope on the marble floor of the terrace room, which had been. Penelope would learn when she put them on approximately 40 minutes later, precisely correct. Her mother arrived at 3:02 in the afternoon of the second Thursday of November, in the specific armored Escalade that Gabriel Aventino's staff had dispatched to the specific two-bedroom on North Sheridan at approximately 12:40. Having been informed of the specific situation, in the specific measured terms Gabriel Aventino had personally telephoned to explain, at approximately 1:25. Rebecca Kopikin, 63 years old, who had spent 11 years quietly suspecting the specific full shape of her late husband's professional life and had never, in the specific 11 years, permitted herself to know it with any specificity, arrived at the specific ground floor bedroom of the Astor Street residence and stood in the doorway looking at her daughter in the specific dove-gray silk pajamas that had fit her precisely, in the specific bed that had been made with the specific linens Dr. Vasquez had specified, in the specific room that had been prepared with the specific attention it had been prepared with, and Rebecca, who was a woman of considerable interior composure, understood in the specific instant of taking in the specific arrangement that the specific arrangement had been arranged by the specific son of the specific man whose name she had not spoken aloud in 11 years and had never permitted her daughter to ask about, and she looked at her daughter, and she said, in the specific voice she had used with her daughter through the specific full arc of her daughter's life, Penelope, I am here. Tell me what has happened, in whatever terms are useful to you, and permit me to arrange with you the specific rest of what happens next. And Penelope Kopikin, in the specific bed of the specific ground floor guest room, permitted her mother to sit on the specific edge of the specific bed and to take her hand, and she told her, in the specific full completeness her mother deserved to hear. And Rebecca listened for the specific 20 minutes it took to tell, without interruption, and when Penelope concluded, Rebecca was quiet for a specific long moment, and then she said, I am glad you are here. Your father would be glad you are here. The specific son of your father's specific friend has arranged for the two of us to be here, and I am going to permit the specific arrangement, and I am going to be with you for the specific 72 hours the physician specified. And after the specific 72 hours, we are going to have specific longer conversations that I have been waiting 11 years to have, and I am glad we are going to have them. Sleep now. I will be here when you wake up. Nothing further is required of you today. Penelope slept in the specific bed of the specific ground floor guest room, in the specific dove-gray silk pajamas that had fit her precisely, with the specific weight of her mother's hand resting on her forearm in the specific way her mother had held her forearm through every difficult night of her childhood, and she slept the specific first uninterrupted sleep she had slept in 9 days, and she slept for the specific 11 hours Dr. Vasquez had predicted the specific first cycle would require. And when she woke at 2 in the specific morning of the second Friday of November in the specific quiet of a residence that had been prepared for her at every specific level of detail, she woke to the specific first hour of a life she had not, at 11:47 the previous morning, permitted herself to imagine as available, and she understood in the specific quiet of the waking moment that Adrian Thorne had, at some point during the specific hours of her sleep, ceased to be a specific problem in her life, and that the specific mechanism by which the specific outcome had been produced was not something she was going to be asked to think about, and that Gabriel Aventino was somewhere in the specific residence and would be immediately available if she required him to be, and that her mother was in the specific cottage on the specific grounds and would be immediately available if she required her to be, and that the specific arrangement had, in the specific 11 hours of her first uninterrupted sleep, become the specific new operational reality of her life. She lay in the specific dark of the guest room, in the specific quiet, and she permitted herself, for the specific first time in 6 weeks, to cry, quietly, and without performance, and without the specific need to control the specific volume or duration of it. For the specific full weight of 6 weeks and 11 years, and the specific father she had loved and had never fully known, and the specific mother she was going to know differently now, and the specific self she had been surviving as and the specific new self she was going to permit herself to become in the specific weeks and months to come. Over the 72 hours that followed, Penelope Kopikin did nothing but rest. She rested in the specific bed of the specific ground floor guest room. She ate the specific meals that were brought to her on a specific schedule Dr. Vasquez had designed. She saw her mother for specific intervals throughout each day. She saw Gabriel Aventino for specific intervals throughout each day. Always brief, always careful, always calibrated to the specific level of interaction Dr. Vasquez had specified was appropriate to her specific stage of recovery, and she watched him, over the specific accumulated intervals, reveal himself in the specific small careful increments of a man who understood that trust of the specific quality that mattered was built in specific small increments over specific stretches of time, and she permitted the specific revealing, and she did her own small careful revealing back to him, and by the end of the 72 hours the specific foundation between them had been established at a specific quality that neither of them had been in a position to imagine 3 days earlier. At the end of the 72 hours, Dr. Vasquez cleared her for the specific return of ordinary activity. She had, at that specific point, been at the Astor Street residence for 3 days. She was, at that specific point, going to move to the specific cottage on the grounds where her mother was staying for the specific next stage of the specific arrangement, which was going to involve her not returning to the West Superior apartment and not returning to work at the Waldorf Devonshire for a specific additional 2-week period, at which point she and Julian and Gabriel were going to have a specific joint conversation about the specific longer-term shape of the specific arrangement they were going to arrive at. The specific longer-term shape, when it arrived, involved Penelope opening her own pastry program in a specific dedicated pastry cafe that Gabriel Aventino identified and purchased in a specific corner of the Gold Coast that Julian himself specifically recommended as the specific optimum location, in a specific building that Penelope designed the specific interior of with a specific architect Gabriel Aventino had used for 3 prior projects and considered specifically competent. The cafe opened 5 months later to a specific reception that was, in the specific vocabulary of the city's food press, the most anticipated pastry opening of the year, and it operated, from the specific first week, at a specific standard that made it, within 4 months of opening, one of the specific 2 most consistently reviewed pastry programs in the city. Julian, at the specific launch party in the specific interior Penelope had designed, took her by both hands and looked at her with the specific expression of a man who had watched a specific version of a specific person emerge over a specific 18-month period he had helped to make possible, and he said, in the specific quiet of the specific moment, "You are the specific pastry chef I understood you were the specific first time I ate your specific milfy. Congratulations. I am glad to have been of specific use." Penelope kissed him on both cheeks in the specific French manner he had taught her over the specific 18 months at the Devonshire, and she thanked him, and Julian returned to the specific main room of the launch party and continued to hold the specific full attention of the specific portion of the room that always oriented itself around him at the specific events he attended. And Penelope turned to Gabriel Aventino, who had been standing at the specific short distance he understood was the correct short distance during the specific interval of her conversation with Julian, and she said, quietly, "It is the specific opening I would not have permitted myself to imagine 6 months ago," and Gabriel said, "It is the specific opening you were going to have regardless. I permitted myself the specific pleasure of arranging for it to happen sooner than it would have happened otherwise. That is the specific extent of my contribution. The specific pastry program is entirely your work." Penelope looked at him. She smiled, in the specific full private version of her smile that had, over the specific 5 months since her recovery, become one of the specific arrangements they made available to each other. She said, "That is a specific characteristically generous description of the specific division of labor. I am going to accept it in the specific spirit it is offered, and I am going to note privately that the specific characterization is not entirely accurate, and I am going to permit both the specific acceptance and the specific note to stand. Gabriel Aventino, in the specific evening light of the launch party at the specific pastry cafe in the Gold Coast, permitted himself the specific full version of the specific smile he had first shown her at close range on the specific marble floor of the terrace room, and he took her hand, and they crossed the room together to the specific corner where her mother was in the specific animated conversation with the specific mother of Gabriel's second lieutenant that had, over the specific 5 months, become one of the specific unexpected friendships of Rebecca Kopakin's later life. 6 months after the specific launch of the specific pastry cafe, on the specific Sunday morning of the specific second week of May, Gabriel Aventino asked Penelope Kopakin to marry him in the specific back garden of the Astor Street residence, at the specific hour Penelope had come to know as his specific preferred hour of the specific day, which was the specific hour of 10 in the morning, when the specific quality of Chicago spring light on the specific garden had a specific quality he considered particularly worth being present for. He asked her in the specific quiet plain terms that had characterized every important sentence he had said to her since the specific marble floor. She accepted him in the specific same terms. Rebecca Kopakin, who was watching from the specific window of the specific cottage, saw the specific acceptance and did not attempt to conceal the specific tears that arrived in her specific, composed 64-year-old face, and she made the specific phone call to her sister in Portland that she had been waiting 6 months to make. They married in the specific garden 3 months later, on the specific first Saturday of August, in a specific small ceremony that included the specific full assembled staff of the pastry cafe and the specific full assembled staff of the Astor Street residence, and the specific 2 lieutenants of Gabriel's organization whose specific wives and children Penelope had come to know as her specific family, and Julian and his specific wife of 38 years who had, over the specific 10 months since the specific fainting, become one of the specific most valued mentors of Penelope's professional life. And Rebecca Kopakin walked her daughter down the specific short aisle in the specific manner Rebecca's own husband would have wanted her to walk her daughter down the specific short aisle. And Penelope Kopakin wore a specific gown of emerald silk that had been designed for her by a specific atelier in Milan on Gabriel's specific instructions, and she carried, in the specific small bouquet of specific white roses in her hands, a specific single-pressed flower from the specific garden her father had kept behind their house when she had been a specific small child, which her mother had, without Penelope's knowledge, preserved for 11 years in the specific expectation that her daughter would, eventually, marry a specific man of whom her father would have approved, and Penelope Kopakin, at the specific altar in the specific back garden of the specific residence her husband and her mother had built for her, at the specific bottom of a specific hard fall on a specific marble floor, married Gabriel Aventino in the specific full presence of the specific full circle of people who had, over the specific 10 months since the specific fainting, become her specific family. Penelope Kopakin spent 6 weeks running on the specific fumes of a woman managing and escalating private cruelty on the specific reserves of professional discipline and refused sleep, and she collapsed, at the specific limit of what her specific body was willing to continue to permit, into the specific catching arms of the specific man who had been arranging for the specific quiet supports of her life for 11 years without ever having asked her to know it. And she discovered, in the specific 90 seconds of unconsciousness and the specific 8 minutes that followed it, that the specific alone she had been surviving as had ended, and that the specific new arrangement she was about to be moved into was the specific arrangement her father had been arranging for her the whole time. If you love this story of a woman who collapsed at the specific end of her operational reserves and was caught by the specific one man who had been paying attention to her from a considerate distance for the whole of her adult life, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs the specific reminder that the specific fall you are afraid to take might turn out to be the specific fall you have been waiting to be caught from. And subscribe to the channel for more slow burn, possessive mafia romances where the women who thought they were surviving alone find, at the specific bottom of their hardest moments, the specific people who were built to be there when they finally let themselves fall.